Welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series, novels, and films. For this episode, when darkness falls and whales come down the hall, who you gonna call? That's right, we're talking Ghostbusters. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Ford, joined as always by Andrew Knuckles.
Hey, how's it going?
And Joel Killingsworth.
Hello.
So guys, before we jump into the meat of this episode, what are you watching right now? I'll start with Andrew.
Start with me? Oh, okay. Because last time you were just,
There was never a last time. This is the first time.
You're right. There is. Okay, yeah, sure.
Welcome to the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so yeah, currently this week, we're watching Come You Can't Communicate, which is an anime about a girl that has a social anxiety issue to where she can't really communicate with others very well, and it's super wholesome. It's just a slice of life comedy of essentially her trying to make friends, and of course all the friends that she tries to make are very quirky as well, and they all have their own little personality things and that kind of stuff. It's really fun.
This sounds kind of like the anime version of Sesame Street.
I mean, sure.
Or maybe Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Tried, true, successful formula.
It's been a very long time since I've seen Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh, all the characters have various forms of mental, not illness. Thank you. Not disability. I could blank there for a moment. Anyways, moving on. Is that all you're watching?
Pretty much for right. I mean, the only other thing that I'm really looking forward to is the Cowboy Bebop Netflix show coming out soon.
Are you looking forward to that, really?
I am looking forward to watching it and creating judgment as I watch it, yes.
Cautiously optimistic. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on. Joel?
I am trying to catch up with Critical Role Season 2. So that is basically a D&D game played live by voice actors. So it's not necessarily the kind of D&D game that you would see at a game table at your local game store. It's very high production quality, and the actors do a really good job making everything really entertaining. They just released the first couple of episodes of their third campaign, Season 3, and so I'm trying to get caught up to where I can actually watch that.
I really was going to make a joke about how if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know what Critical Role is, I don't know what Venn diagram that could possibly be. And then I looked over and I saw Andrew. I was like, oh, it's right there.
I mean, I am not a D&D player. I've played one singular campaign of D&D in my entire life, and I enjoyed it. It was definitely a lot of fun, but I've never really been a big RPG kind of guy.
I mean, I'm really not a D&D player either, but I still know what Critical Role is just because I exist on the internet.
Yeah, well, I don't really watch Twitch channels at all, unless it's like League of Legends streaming. That's about as far as I go.
And I will say that I didn't really get the appeal of watching D&D
other
played.
People.
Yeah, until I started using it as a tool for picking up techniques, right? Because I've been DMing my own game for the last couple of years and trying to figure out, okay, I'm trying to get better at this. I'm trying to provide the best possible experience I can for my players. What are some of the people that do this kind of at a professional level do? What are the sort of techniques they employ? Yeah,
well, and like for that kind of stuff, it's really cool because it is always really fun to see how other people play the exact same game that you play, and just how they do it differently.
Yeah.
So what are you watching and or looking forward to, Stephen?
I'm not watching a thing. You know it. It's me. Just a little YouTube.
The one that actively doesn't watch things that are recommended to him unless it's assigned by the podcast.
By other people. It's homework. By other people. No, I mean, just watching a little YouTube, little history stuff.
Well, but you like to watch all of the model building channels like Studson Studios.
Oh, yeah, Studson's great. Plasmo. Slightly different. North of the Border is another model building channel that Lauren and I have been watching. It's similar to Studson, maybe not quite as cleverly edited. It's still pretty entertaining, though.
Well, have you guys been watching Great British Bake Off as well?
Lauren does, and just by osmosis, I pick it up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I Joel, do you watch it or no?
I have seen bits and pieces of 3 episodes.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys are totally lost, but I'm pretty sure Jurgen or Giuseppe's going to win because they're the best.
I mean, it's just a microcosm of Europe. all of Europe showed up, and Germany is just taking by storm.
I mean, he's won Star Baker 3 times in a row.
I'll take your word for it.
Well, not 3 times in a row, but 3 times this season. And that's generally pretty rare.
He's pretty. There was the episode that Lauren was watching, I think last night or the night before. They were like stacking cakes. I don't know baking, and like stuff was collapsing, and a lady like forgot to set a timer on her oven, and it was just sheer panic.
Oh, I think that was 2 episodes ago, and yes, that whole episode was just a total nightmare.
I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like when I go into the kitchen, I have a recipe that somebody else made, and they've done it, and it obviously must work. So if I mess this up, it is my fault. And these people are just like, they have been given a task with not nearly enough time to complete it, and they are panicking. And I am sitting on the couch and like, how did you forget that timer? What is wrong with you? What kind of amateur show is this? I would burn the whole place down if I was there.
They're all amateur bakers. But anyways,
they're way beyond being amateur. They're not amateur bakers.
So that's kind of the whole shtick of the show, is that like they've never been professional bakers. However, they do have to go through a relatively rigorous test to make sure that they can at least hold their own on the show against other amateur bakers.
I mean, the one, I don't know which, I think it was probably Jurgen. They had to make like a sugar dome. And every other dome looked like I would expect if you have to melt sugar and create it into a dome.
And his was
frosty. His looked like a professional glass maker made this. It was so clear.
It is exactly what you would expect out of German precision.
Sure, why not? Anyways, so on that note, I think it's time to move forward. We had a little appetizer. Let's move forward into maybe a little bit of the meatier part of the show. Yeah?
You really like using the analogy.
We are just talking about a baking show. Can I use food analogies? Anyways, so jumping forward, Joel, you want to give us maybe a little rundown on the format here?
Right. So we're going to break down 2 films for you this episode. We're going to talk about Ghostbusters, released in 1984, and the sequel Ghostbusters 2. We're going to be going through 1989. We're going to be going through each of those sequentially, spoiler-free. Then we're going to go into an intermission. Past the spoiler wall, we're going to break down each one point by point and
of what we made, like why we made the choices that we did for the rating and everything like that.
Yeah, how the score was achieved.
Yes,
basically.
and the reason why we're doing this is because Ghostbusters Afterlife is coming out very soon.
Oh man, I could have brought that up. And what am I looking forward to? Because I am looking forward to that. Honestly.
I am too, and you'll find out why. But the main thing is that we wanted to cover the first 2 films before we covered the new film.
Yeah, so essentially we have a 2-part series, and the next episode will be on Afterlife.
Yep. So yeah.
So Joel, so that was the format.
Correct.
So now that we've discussed how the format's going to work, let's just jump right in.
Yeah, so for Ghostbusters the first, we collectively gave it a score of 8.2 out of 10. There was a little bit of disagreement. I did my best to bring the score down as hard as I possibly could, but
drill, baby, drill.
It survived my assassination attempt at a relatively high score.
Now
scarred and deformed.
Now there is a little bit of an asterisk caveat there, is that Joel had really only seen the first Ghostbusters maybe one time throughout his entire life, and Steven and I had watched it. I mean, like we pretty much grew up with it.
I mean, I feel like you're sabotaging your own case, because you're like, nostalgia played a role.
Well, are you implying a nostalgia bias here? Are you putting a nostalgia bias on me?
There absolutely could be a nostalgia bias.
It is. Absolutely.
But yeah, so just as that kind of thing. Anyways, Ghostbusters 2.
Ghostbusters the second did not survive the assassination attempt and came out at a 5.2 collectively.
I'm pretty sure we all kind of were on the same page for that one.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any one of us brought it up or brought it down collectively. We all
not really. We're all basically in agreement there. So it's the first one is a cult classic, right? Like
it's not even a cult classic. It's just a classic.
It was
it's a cult classic if you're not in the cult.
It was the highest grossing comedy movie until Home Alone came out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a substantial amount of pop culture.
I retract my label.
Joel, who only saw this movie once until watching it the other day.
It's just such a cult classic.
I just thought I wasn't in the cult.
I mean, it's possible you weren't, but maybe the cult is just the general public.
Yep. Yeah.
But the second film is not widely regarded as being as good. So that is also reflected in
it was deemed a critical and financial failure.
It was, despite actually doing really well at the box office whenever it first came out.
I mean, it was not that far off what Ghostbusters first one made.
Yeah, so the first Ghostbusters made just shy of 300 million on its box office run, and then the second Ghostbusters made around 230 million.
I think it was actually more like 260. It really wasn't.
It wasn't that far off, but for what the expectations were going into it, and the budget that they set for it and everything like that, they did consider it a financial failure.
Yeah, I don't actually believe the production budget for 2 was significantly higher than 1. A lot of what you see in the improvement in effects, which we'll get into, was just kind of a product of the passage of time.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it was the expectation. The first Ghostbusters was absolute smash, surprise hit. How could the second one possibly not follow up with that? And then it didn't.
Yeah.
Right. So do we need to give, it's almost 40 years old movie. Do we need to give a synopsis?
So these guys form a business to hunt ghosts for money.
Nailed it.
Hijinks ensue.
Nailed it. And in the second movie,
these guys reform their business to hunt ghosts for money, and hijinks ensue.
Nailed it.
Done. So you would think with a 30-year-old movie set that we wouldn't have to worry about a spoiler wall. However, here we are, and we're giving you that warning now. So, we have this intermission coming up. This is your chance. If you come back, then I can't help you.
Get off the bus now while you still can.
What is the Speed? This isn't Speed. This is Ghostbusters.
Speed was in the 90s. This is 89 and 84.
The 90s are still 30 years ago.
Don't say that.
But before we head into the intermission, if you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. Thanks.
And welcome back. We are back from a very brief intermission. Time to get into some deep digging, spoiler heavy talk of movies that are more than 3 decades old.
Yeah. One is older than me and one is slightly younger than me.
Yes,
I was born right in the middle.
That is a true statement. So guys, let's just jump right into it. Ghostbusters 1, right? We gave that an 8.2 combined.
Yep.
So we're going to run down a couple of categories.
We need to figure out where the hole is of why this is not a 9.5 or above.
The perfect paragon of a film.
I mean, it's up there. It is up there.
I've got some holes.
Okay, that's fine. We can get into the holes here in just a second. However, I will note that this movie and Raiders of the Lost Ark are definitely considered very close to the perfect films for entertainment purposes.
No, that's an internet.
That's like just a thing.
That's a standard.
Like
that's like your opinion, man.
You can absolutely go look that up.
That's somewhere. Like somebody else's opinion, man.
Absolutely. All media is subjective, and every score that we give this is just an aggregate score between all of us.
So what is the perfect film anyway if it's all subjective?
Whatever people think it is. Anyways,
entertainment.
Moving off of this never-ending pit of despair. So we've got 4 scoring categories that go into our total score. So we're looking at the spectacle, the performance, the score, music, and the plot. Yes. Those are the factors that go into these scores, and the scores that we assign to them feed into that 8.2. So I guess let's take the first one, spectacle.
Yep.
Right? And I'm going to start it first because I'm going to take all the good points and leave y'all in the dust. So I gave it an 8. The effects did not age well.
No.
The special effects.
Whoa.
No, they did not age well. That's not an indisputable thing. The practical effects, right? When they shoot something, they're trying to hit Slimer and they're blasting pieces everywhere. That bit, that's really believable because that was stuff actually blowing up. The superimposed laser beam that they rushed to get done that they couldn't use ILM for. don't hold up great, especially on a high definition
ILM
TV.
is Industrial Light and Magic for those that don't understand
the
acronyms.
Uninitiated, yes. But they don't hold up well. But I will say the overall scale of the events fit really well with kind of, again, the spectacle, right? This is New York, and it very emphatically feels like New York, even though a lot of the backgrounds are just painted. So Joel?
So I gave it a 5 out of 10 for Spectacle.
Brutal.
The special effects did not hold up well, and I tried to cut it some slack, because it's an older film, not dealing with the technology was not mature that they were dealing with, so in order to try to cut it some slack, I was trying to find a good comparison point from the time. This film, released in 1984, compared to Return of the Jedi, released in 1983, and it's not necessarily easy to find the original version that hasn't been touched up.
That's very true.
But even comparing with my memories of the original version, there's not much comparison there at all with the special effects.
So go ahead.
Well, so the only thing that I would say there is that the time constrictions that they were under for producing the film was 10 months total from start to finish.
Sure.
Because they wanted it to be out in summer, and
that's not an acceptable excuse.
No, that is an acceptable excuse because they also couldn't use Industrial Light and Magic because they were working on Temple of Doom.
But just because you're not allowed to use the nice glitter glue in class doesn't mean that the teacher is not going to mark it wrong when she asked for glitter glue and you only used the basic white Elmers.
I'm sorry.
Maybe a little glitter you sprinkled in, try to get off your fingers.
Honestly, all of the puppet work and practical effects in the film were really good.
No. The practical effects are fine. It's the stuff that had to be superimposed over the practical effects.
Right, like the beams from the proton packs.
They're not great.
The effects on the majority of the ghosts themselves, I thought, were just very poor. And so basically on that alone, and there was a whole bunch of lightning effects and stuff that was all very kind of woo.
I thought whatever.
And so
the
basically
was the most acceptable of all of
just on special effects alone, I knocked it all the way down to a 5.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I'm just gonna go into this.
For it.
I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Ooh, I don't think it deserves that high. Obviously, I said 8.
Well, okay, Spectacle isn't just visual effects though. It's it is the energy of the film. It is the presentation of the film, and Ghostbusters does this almost flawlessly.
I agree, but I think there are other factors in it that are later down this list.
Well, and that's the thing is I would agree. I mean, I would disagree with that in the sense of there's nothing else in this list that I've made that would detract from the spectacle of the film, because you have the charisma and the chemistry of the whole cast.
That's performance.
Then I know, but that also goes into the overall feel of the film.
It does.
And you don't get that energy if you have a cast that doesn't like each other or spending, that kind of stuff. And it's really, it's just one of those things. And I can't disagree that some of the special effects just didn't really age well. However, at the time of making of 1984, this was still really good.
I mean, we already established they weren't able to use the industry-leading experts for the effects.
Yeah, but they did have people that worked at ILM.
Sure. I think, don't get me wrong, I see where you're coming from. I don't totally see where Joel's coming from, because a 5 really isn't deserved.
Really,
5 is middle of the road, man.
Brutal. That was harsh.
5. So
Joel, I took into account that this movie was old. So anyways, give him a 5.
It wasn't Dune.
It wasn't
1 out of 10.
I just saw Dune again.
It wasn't Return of the Jedi. That's literally what I said.
Well, but you said no. Hold on though, and I quote: "It wasn't Return of the Jedi, and it's difficult. It's difficult to find a version that hasn't been retouched.
It is a subjective process.
To my memory, Joel, how old are you?
That is.
Did you see the movie in
privileged information?
Did you see the movie in theater?
I did not see either of these films in theater.
Okay.
I saw an original version of Return of the Jedi 10 years ago.
I mean, Andrew's got Laserdiscs.
I have Laserdisc that we can watch.
I saw it on Laserdisc, actually.
Oh, actually, now I need to get the Ghostbusters Laserdisc show so I can watch it. Anyways, okay, so
moving forward.
Yeah, so Spectacle.
You disagree. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, we definitely disagree there. I have a very high thing, and it's very interesting too because I've never been like a big Ghostbusters guy. Like whenever someone asks me like, oh, what my favorite 80s movies films are, I never actually say Ghostbusters.
It really doesn't. It doesn't jump up for me either. And I have a lot of, part of the problem is I have a lot of favorite movies from the 80s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good movies in that decade.
And but whenever I think about it, I'm like, I never have like if someone's like, oh, let's go watch Ghostbusters, I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, no, I'm not
I'm never going to be like, oh, I don't want to watch that.
Anyways, we got we got a 9, we got an 8, and then we have a 5. I mean, that's about typical for how the scores go.
The average came out favorable. So,
anyways, moving forward, performance. I'm gonna let Andrew go first.
Okay, so casting, performance, how everyone acted, everything like that. I gave it a 10 out of 10, and
my man.
I'm like, this is kind of one of those lightning in a bottle moments where you have the best of the tenure of SNL casting, which is generally like, so basically every generation you have like a new set of comedy films that come out for the people that are working at SNL at the time, or Saturday Night Live for those that aren't acronym friendly. And hey, some people may not be familiar.
No, fair.
But so you have like Dan Aykroyd, you have Bill Murray, Rick Moranis, like all these big names.
Rick Moranis isn't an SNL alumni.
He's not?
No, Second City in Chicago.
That's what it was.
Yep. Same as John Candy.
Yeah. But so you have all these people, and they come together, and they have such good chemistry on screen, where they have this kind of vernacular that only they can get just because they're just so used to working with each other.
Right.
And then you have the actual performance that they do on screen for the characters that they're like. Rick Moranis's character is just he's just so funny because he fits that super nerdy guy, and he's very genuine,
socially awkward. Like the beginning, early Rick Moranis, socially awkward, unsure.
Yep.
Trying to project confidence, trying to find ways to be more, I don't want to say assertive, but just more of a person who is actually outgoing.
Yep.
Right. And then it just collapses into him once he's become possessed.
Yeah.
Into this shambling wreck of a person who it's incredible. And that is an absolutely incredible performance by a person who, in most circumstances, if you saw that person coming down the New York City street at you, that person is on something or they are actually possessed.
Yeah, and then I'll have to also mention Sigourney Weaver, who had just come from doing Aliens and
Alien,
because then Aliens came out in 86. Yeah. And she was considered a serious actress at the time, and now she's in this weird campy ghosting movie. I mean,
she auditioned for this, and according to the Ghostbusters trivia, right?
Yeah,
she sold it. Her audition was the transformation of her character into the dog.
Yeah, so
she did like this whole like writhing, barking, growling, aggressive thing, and Reitman was just like, "Yep, that." Sold. I believed it because I mean it is one of those things. I gave a 10.
Okay,
just to get that out of the way so that Joel can drag it down. But that is one of the things, right? But speaking of like a serious actor,
yeah,
you made Sigourney Weaver look into the eyes of Bill Murray and say, "Gozer the Gozerian, the destroy." I mean, it's just a babble of words, and yep, she's possessed. That is. Don't want none of that. Nope. Sure don't. But no, I just kind of to echo you. These are 80s comedy,
just
legends at their peak.
Yeah,
and this is Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and
Harold Ramis.
But funny enough, it almost didn't happen.
Yep.
When Dan Aykroyd wrote it, Belushi is who he had tapped for.
Oh, you're right.
The lead,
and then I think Belushi passed away before they started.
He OD'd prior to that, so there were some searching moment, and Bill Murray expressed interest, and it was like, oh yes, perfect.
Yeah,
we'll do it. I don't know. It's kind of always been presented as a tribute. I don't know if it's really a tribute or not, but Slimer's representation is supposed to kind of look like Belushi.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
kind of
that one.
see it in the like Animal House.
Yeah.
Comparisons, but I don't know if that's really a tribute or not. But anyways, I 10. Everybody, there is no single performance that I can point to in this movie and say, yeah, that's lackluster. Yeah, that didn't come through. I didn't feel that. I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, they just had such a good feeling. Even I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy who played the EPA guy, that the antagonist, essentially,
Walter Atherton or something like that.
Yeah,
Peck
is
the character's
and
name.
he was such a good mean character that just
the
foils
the petty governmental jerk.
Yep.
Right? I think you were looking it up. Did I get it right?
Very close. It was, the actor's name is William Atherton, and the character is
Walter Peck.
Walter Peck. You know what? I was closer than either of y'all. How about that?
Okay, so Joel.
So I've been quiet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very silent.
I wanted you to have your words.
Oh no. Oh no.
And I'm actually going to back them up.
Yeah.
On the whole, I thought that particularly Sigourney Weaver's performance elevated the entire piece.
Absolutely.
Right? She was given this just hokey part and brought quality and dedication to it, and it was a really, really good result.
I mean, she sold out in basically every single scene.
Yeah.
So you didn't give us a score.
Oh, the score was 7 out of 10.
Oh my!
That's
I'm going to echo
acceptable.
you. I'm going to echo you and your great scores.
I'm trying. Okay,
and back you up.
I'm trying to do the sandwich. I'm trying to do the compliment sandwich.
All right. Well, let's hear some.
So we've had the good thing. The bad thing, I did not like Bill Murray's performance really at all, and part of it has to do with the writing, and part of it has to do with probably the direction. I'm not really certain that I can lay any of it at Bill Murray's feet directly, but you on the side of the screen that I can't differentiate those things in the final result.
Is it because he's a creep?
It's partly because he's a creep. It's partly because...
But he sold it, right? You believe that he was a creep.
I believed he was a creep sometimes.
I believe he was a creep the whole time.
No. But there's also the issue that there are scenes where he should have been terrified, in which comparable scenes later he was terrified, but they played it off for laughs instead, and so there is a complete and utter lack of internal consistency for the character.
I disagree. I disagree entirely. He is always a coward throughout, and whether or not he shows fear, and all the way up to the very end of the movie, right? The Marshmallow Man explodes, and everyone is buried in what was actually shaving cream but marshmallow, and they come together to see, oh, are you all right? Are you all right? And he has nothing on him because he was the first one out.
Yep.
Right. And so like there are some scenes where that occurs. There are other scenes where he is obviously talking to a horribly possessed woman, but he is sitting there making jokes at her the entire time. Right?
Well, because that's his way of coping with this incredibly weird phenomenon that's happening in front of him. Hey, the girl that he is interested in is now floating 4 feet above the bed, growling at him. He didn't sell that to me because he was deadpan the entire time, right? Well, and I think that's just his style. However, I will also say that Murray himself is notorious for just kind of showing up to to movie sets and stuff like that just kind of whenever he feels like it. And he is just considered an enigma. And whenever he just, like, if he's there, he's there. And if he's not, well, he's just not there.
I mean, it also may just be that deadpan is the only way to not just break out laughing at the fact that Sigourney Weaver is being put through this and has to say these things and he has to respond to it.
I do. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other major points that I have are really in just the character writing for Sigourney Weaver's character, because she ends up going from this dude is a creep, get away from me. Oh no, I have a traumatic experience. I love him. Right.
I mean, that's a classic story.
It's terrible.
It's not good. It's just a classic story.
I thought that was just a very common thing in the 80s.
It's a trope.
That doesn't. Okay, so being a trope and being tied to a time period where this film was in does not make it good.
I didn't say it did. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I never said that it was a good thing. Okay. I just said that does not detract from my score of the casting.
No. Your scores are set. You had your time to speak. And then the other part was there's a certain level of being a creep that is entertaining to watch. And I think that they went time and a half past that.
Oh, they went way past it. Yeah.
And it was to the point where it was painful to watch scenes that he was in because he was such a distasteful character.
I actually agree under that. I would put that more under plot when we get there, but I agree.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
Because it's definitely one of those things where it's hard to talk about the characters and their acting without talking about the plot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all of these things are interconnected, and you can take issues and you can make arguments for putting them in this category or that category.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's kind of why you have an aggregate score, because everything is connected to what turns out to be the final score of the movie. So, moving on to score.
Get Joel out of the way first.
Joel, what do you think?
I gave it a 7. I thought that the main theme is really catchy. It's really good. It's spot on. It's perfect.
It will be stuck in your head forever.
And the fact that they tied it to the, I'll say, financial enterprise of the business of ghostbusting, and it's in the commercial and it's part of the lore of the world in that fashion, is perfect. The rest of the music in the film was fine. So that's kind of where I am there.
I will say that within the universe, the Ghostbusters went out and found some poor starving artists and found a phenomenal graphic designer and a phenomenal songwriter. just boom, boom, 1-2 punch, baby. Andrew, what you got?
So I gave score, as I flip over to it, I gave it a big 1-0.
A 0? What?
1-0, meaning a 10.
Oh, 10 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Explain yourself.
It's kind of on the same line as Joel. The main theme is by Ray Parker Jr. is just so hard to forget that
it is catchy.
It is super catchy. There's a reason why it was I think #1 on the billboards for a number of weeks.
That is an unsubstantiated fact. I don't know that one.
No, I'm almost positive that it was. I just don't have exact numbers in front of me right now. Then you also have a bunch of other really good 80s, pure 80s music to help kind of elevate the rest of the film during, the big moments, especially whenever the explosion happens from the containment field and all the spirits and stuff are kind of going around, and it's magic kind of song happening. I think it's just Magic is the actual name of the title of the song. I don't remember the artist, but going through, just everything kind of fits, and it fits with the energy of the film. And the two original songs, even Dana's theme is still really good. And it's music, I think, is the most important part of any kind of media, because music is what really connects you with the characters and connects you with the story. Where if you remove any of those tracks and you just have them acting in front of a screen with no additional score behind them,
it's totally flat.
Then there's just really nothing there. Even if they're an amazing actor or actress like Sigourney Weaver or Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd or anything like that. But then once you add that music back in, or you add, just even little tones and everything like that, it makes such a big difference in the feeling, and it helps you connect with that. And there's very little time in the film that I ever felt that I was bored because either the music didn't fit what was happening in the scene. Steven?
I gave it a 9.
Okay.
Y'all have already kind of really beaten it to death, but an absolutely iconic 80s beats.
Yep.
Mixed in with the ultimate showstopper, the theme, right?
Yep.
Save the day, right?
Yeah.
Perfect build up to the end. I do think they did a good job outside of kind of the pop music of setting mood, setting tone. You have scene transitions where you're going from the Ghostbusters and it's kind of light and boppy as they're kind of shenaniganing around. And then it jumps over to Dana coming home to her building that is haunted and possessed. And we know it's haunted and possessed. And it does this looming shot down on her, and the tone, the mood builds up in the music, and you could feel it has horror movie aspects, right?
Yep.
And it's not done, it's not like it's a really dark shot, it's not necessarily creepy, it's purely music. And I think that is the part that sets it into that upper range, not a Joel 7 score here, because they don't just rely on the pop music or, oh, we hired some artists to make really good stuff. They also take kind of a more traditional approach where they build up mood and tone.
Yeah, that's fair.
In the song, in standard scenes that don't require the kind of pop, save the day or whatnot in it.
Well, and it's also one of those things too where, like, because this is a movie about ghosts and paranormal and that kind of stuff, you are always going to kind of edge on the horror tropes, especially like the beginning of the film when at the New York Library, whenever it's following the librarian around, the books and stuff are moving and the little
you almost get the classic in that scene. You have it's like right there. They don't quite step into that territory, but it's right there.
Yeah, and with that, you're like, oh, this is gonna be,
this is a horror movie.
Yeah, this is a horror movie. And then then you go into the next scene with Bill Murray shocking the college kids, and trying to hit on the college girl. But you have those kind of juxtapositions.
He was succeeding.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a creep, but in that scene, she's at least leaning into it. Unlike Sigourney Weaver for almost the entire movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving forward, I think we've said everything we want to say there.
Yeah.
So plot.
Yeah.
And I'm going to steal this one. We'll go first.
Sure.
Cool. 9. Let's
okay.
get to 9.
Yeah.
Mostly because, and I think this, honestly, there are a lot of 80s movies, and this is selection bias, right? The best 80s movies are the ones we remember. And the reason we remember them is because they're the best, and they're the best because they were the most tightly written and the best paced movies from that decade.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really tightly written, well-paced movie. There's almost no wasted scenes. Don't give me that look, Joe. I can see you. See those eyes.
I'm objecting to the word tightly.
It's very tightly paced.
It's a sieve, man. So many holes.
No. You're looking for plot holes. I'm not talking about
leaps in logic,
consistency in logic, because ultimately it's a comedy. I'm talking about the speed at which the story is told.
And
there are no moments where there are just dead lulls, or it's just like there's one. I can point to one scene in the entire movie where you could say, well, maybe the scene didn't have to go as far as it did, or maybe if I really want to nitpick, there are a couple of Bill Murray being a creep scenes where it was like, okay, yeah, I get it, he's a creep. Cool, he's still being a creep. All right, we got 5 more minutes of him being a creep. I don't need this much of Bill Murray being a creep to know that he's a creep. But at the same time, almost everything else, it all compacts into a complete arc. And you got to give that props. Andrew, you really want to talk, so I'll give you the...
Well, so I was just going to kind of double down on that. Like, the only scene that in the whole movie that really just that felt like it dragged on for me was just whenever he's going into Dana's apartment for the first time, in like basically hitting on her while he's like investigating quotation marks.
Again, it was
the apartment.
We know he's a creep. We don't need 5 more minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. That was the only time that I was just like, okay, this has gone on a little bit too long.
And go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Perfect.
And
but not quite.
It was 90%, pretty good. It's still an A, but I mean, the pacing is what I scored it off of. Is, and this is kind of where Raiders of the Lost Ark is considered one of like almost a perfect film. And this is kind of in the same lines, because there are leaps in logic, it's also a comedy, but then it's also a campy comedy. So there's going to always be some leeway there, and the pacing of the film, there's basically no wasted scenes, and every single scene has the comedic energy to push you into the next one or get you into the scene that they're in, to where you either have Egon just making these really just offbeat kind of jokes,
deadpan,
super deadpan stuff, or you have Bill Murray being a creep, or you have Dan Aykroyd being essentially bullied by the other two into something, or then you just have Rick Moranis just being just unfortunate in his existence.
So I have to say, because before Mr. C's get degrees over here jumps in, before he jumps in, speaking of consistency, there was one thing that as a kid and in other viewings, non-critical viewings, I didn't really pick up on. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this movie. So when Dana comes back from her apartment, right, and she's gone to the grocery store, she puts the eggs on the counter and they start popping.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice the marshmallows?
Stay Puft Marshmallows. Yep.
Right. That's something that just slides right past me most of the time. But when you see it, and there are lots of little pieces like that just scattered all around, I think it was really impressive. Again, we've mentioned it at the start. There's really tight filming constraints. And as far as I know, Stay Puft isn't a real brand, right?
They were not a real brand until.
Right. So like they made that prop. Mm-hmm. And Lord knows they want money. They had Coke placements. They had Crunch Bar placements. They had all kinds of.
Well, from what I understand, Coke was, I think, partners. I think with Columbia Pictures.
Yeah.
And they basically
just showed up in Columbia Pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so Joel, what you got?
Okay, so you're not gonna like it, but I gave it a 5.
Boy, C's get degrees, but not from this guy.
That was just a straight F.
Dang.
So, and basically, I hear the point about this is a comedy. It's not trading.
It doesn't have to be internally logical.
On internal logic, but I posit that dismissing internal logic and only focusing on comedy cheapens the end result, because you are no longer being clever. You're just being funny, and you can be funny and clever, and it's that much better. So I don't give it a pass for lack of internal logic.
I mean, okay, fine. That doesn't mean I have to agree with you.
No. And the scores reflect this.
Yeah.
we are attempting to save you from your own misfortune here, Joe.
I guess with my thing is
I have a laundry list.
I know you do, and we also have a whole other movie to
quick
go
rundown,
through.
Joel. Hit a couple pieces.
Quick rundown.
What'd you hate?
So at the very end of the film, the what did they call it? Demigod, right? The
Destructor.
The Destructor. Gozer the Destructor, described as a demigod, has the power in world, the power to enact the apocalypse, the end times.
Right.
Lashes out with the stated intent of killing our protagonists in a single attack, and barely even like causes them discomfort, like almost pushes them off of the roof.
I would posit that falling off of a 22-story building would be a little more than discomfort.
Did it succeed?
I don't know that that's necessarily irrelevant.
It is absolutely relevant.
Did you see Vader force choke anyone to death? In that council, I mean, you did in the second movie. You definitely did, but in the initial council meeting, did Vader force choke anyone to death?
Did Vader say, "I'm going to kill this man"?
I mean, he was.
Gozer said, "I'm going to kill all 4 of these men," and there was 0 distractions.
Gozer asked if they were gods,
and Gozer,
but then she said,
"Then die," and tried to kill them, and then gave up, and they were still alive.
Well, okay,
no, that's
that's not necessarily.
You're just making excuses. You're just making excuses.
Hold on.
You just want the movie to end with them dead.
The
world ended.
That is not necessarily just because she says now die. That is more on the lines of, I am going to send this energy thing at you, and if you die, then you die. If not, then that wasn't enough.
Okay, well, I disagree. But moving on to the next point, crossing the streams. It's the iconic thing from the film, right? Makes absolutely 0 sense.
It doesn't have to.
I'm not talking about from a science point of view, right? Like it's all pseudoscience.
No,
that's
it still doesn't have to.
But it doesn't make sense in the logic of the film, because they are always putting the streams right next to each other because they're attacking the same ghost with 2 different streams all the time.
Now, again, internal logic, internal consistency. Their version of crossing the streams, right, was they took an incredible amount of effort. They literally put the guns
next to each other
and basically forced themselves into each other to trigger that.
In which case, if it could, so either it can happen accidentally, and whatever his name is, Egon's warning makes sense, and they should really be taking other steps, or it can't happen accidentally. They had to exert a lot of effort to actually do it, and Egon's warning doesn't make sense.
No. You back up. You want your internal consistency, right? They're in the elevator. First big assignment, gonna get Slimer, right? Going up. Right,
Mm-hmm.
This is one of your other points.
It is one of my other points.
He turns on the backpack and it charges up, and they both sidle. Why do they sidle away from it? He says it right there. I really wish we'd had time to test, that we'd had a successful test. Egon knows at some level, conceptual, theoretical level, that there is some amount of crossing of the stream that could be catastrophic. Just because he knows that there is some point, whether it's a 50% cross, 100% cross, 3% cross, they have not had a chance to fully test these things yet. He has no concept of when that point could be. All he knows is theoretically possible. And you see it in the end. They have to absolutely force 4 of them. It's not one stream crossing another. 4 streams have to commingle to trigger what they do.
Yep. Right, but in the end, they don't know where that threshold is.
You're right.
And so the characters was treating it that cavalierly.
I mean, it's total desperation at that point at the end.
No. That's not the point. The point is earlier, when they're treating it that cavalierly by continuing to just use the things without really listening to Egon.
You know,
it plays into them being irresponsible,
non-professional.
But yeah. this is another level of non-professional. You know what I mean? Yeah. Finally, and I'll just throw one more point out there, then we'll move on. We obviously disagree. But the fact that the containment system, all it took was turning power off of the building to make the containment system not just fail, but fail catastrophically and like explode, was ridiculous, because brownouts happen in New York all the time.
so counterpoint. They throw the main switch of power coming into the containment center, right? Con Ed flips the switch. There's no way of knowing if there wasn't generators further back on that circuit, because that's not the point at which power enters the building, right? That's the point at which power is placed into the containment center. And I know I'm looking at it, I'm talking to an electrical engineer, and you're giving me this look.
You do not get, well, it has nothing to do with electrical engineering. It has to do with the fact that you do not get to defend a piece of a film with points that are not brought up in the film. Because if it's not there, if it's in a compendium that you had to, or a comic book that you had to read on the side, right? Then the film didn't do a good enough job explaining it.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
So
they could have. All right, you know what? Hold up, back up before Joel wraps us up with a bunch of negativity. All right,
compliment sandwich.
Huge gold star, right, for the writing and the acting. We skipped over. We missed him. Ernie Hudson, right?
Yep.
The 4th Ghostbuster. Mm-hmm. There are a whole lot of science fiction, fantasy, even horror movies, but other movies that don't do a good enough job of giving you someone who will ask, but why? Or but how?
Yeah.
And he is the perfect character. Comes in, I just need a job. I'll believe anything you want me to believe. It means you'll give me a paycheck. Mm-hmm. And then he hits the points of like, well, but what does that mean? Well, how bad could that be? Which does let them explain some plot, maybe not how the containment center
they
works.
get to explain the Twinkie.
You get the Twinkie. You get the concept. He brings in. Well, what about Revelation? What about end times? Does it not feel like that's where we're headed?
Yeah,
it ramps up that pressure.
And the reason why he's such a good character is because when Bill Murray or Venkman just doesn't care about anything that Egon or Raymond do.
Right.
Whereas in Raymond and Egon are on they're on the same intelligence level to where Egon will mention something and then he'll be like, oh yeah. And the full protonic reversal. No one knows what that is. Doesn't matter. It's just a buzzword. But then you have Ernie come in and he's like, I don't know what that means. You should tell me. I'm the guy. Like, I'm just a guy.
I'm the voice of the audience. Yeah. Every man. Explain this to me. Yeah. And I will say that is one of those things, because we were talking about casting, right? Peak performance from everyone. That position was originally meant to be Eddie Murphy.
And I don't think he would have been good.
See, that's the thing is, I think that they missed something. They dodged it there.
Yeah.
Because he would have just been another funny man, another reactionary voice, whereas Ernie got to be kind of the voice of reason, the voice of like,
the full straight man.
Slow down a minute.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nothing you said makes sense, because in the reality, those were just made up words. You got to give this to me in plain English, right? And I think that they really lucked out with that quote unquote miss of getting him in to be able to play that role. So I think that we have covered everything there. Last score doesn't count. Very, very brief here, people. Very brief. We're going long. Originality. What'd you give it, Joel?
I gave it a 9. Like, I thought this was a very original piece. I thought that everything was pulled together in a new and interesting way. I haven't seen anything from it since that really harps on the same sort of comedic tones while dealing with supernatural phenomenon. And I'm really looking forward to seeing hopefully more of the same with Afterlife.
Yep.
Andrew?
10 out of 10 would see again.
On the originality?
Yep.
Yeah. I gave it an 8. Again, it's all stuff you've seen before, because either this was the point at which everyone referenced to create it in stuff that's been made in the 90s, the 2000s, etc., or it was the individual pieces they pulled in, the horror tropes, the comedy bits, and then mashed together in a really unique way. So yeah, really, really great stuff. So that is it for Ghostbusters 1. Time to jump forward 5 years to Ghostbusters 2, and we're jumping right in here. Spectacle. Joel, what'd you give it?
Well, I think what we're going to find is that my story has not changed. I have just dragged you down to my level.
No, it wasn't you.
It was definitely not you.
No, so for Spectacle, I stayed the same. I gave it a 5 out of 10. I did not really feel like there was a substantial increase in the ability of the film to deliver on overall experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Andrew?
So okay, when you're watching a sequel to essentially one of the greatest it's action comedies,
yeah,
it's one, there's a lot of expectations from the audience, the producers, the filmmakers, everyone, because you're like, well, that was just perfect. Now we either have to do one better, or we have to at least meet some level of expectation for that. And I think this was probably one of the bigger cases of the original cast and writers were just like, well, we're not really interested in making a second one. And then production company was like, actually, we want more money. So
sure,
you need to write us a new one. So they did. And it definitely showed that a lot of their hearts were not necessarily in it, but they did it anyways.
Did you give us a number?
I have not yet. I was prefacing this with Spectacle was a 4 out of 10.
Oh my goodness.
I felt the pacing of the film was just astronomically terrible.
That's for later.
Okay. There was no energy in the film.
That's valid.
The special effects outside of one specific instance in the courtroom, which I thought was spectacular, just never really did anything else for me. Like I didn't like the Statue of Liberty thing at the end. Like the goo stuff just wasn't that interesting. The graphics that they used on Vigo at the end just wasn't that cool. Like it just nothing.
Yeah.
It was just the only thing that saved it was the 2 electric chair ghosts or whatever.
Brothers,
yeah, I thought that entire scene was great.
Okay. So I gave it a 7. I'm going to be the outlier here.
Ugh.
Well, so the effects were markedly improved, and not just in the quality of the effects, but how consistent they were with the real world, right?
Well,
how well they blended into it.
And they definitely had a lot more budget this time.
It wasn't a huge bit more different. I think they had a little bit more. Actually, I think they had less time. I actually think they had less time in this production, from what I saw, or it was very similar.
I'm not sure about that, but
they did have, I think, ILM available to them.
Yeah.
But it's weird. Like, I don't know. It's so hard to rate this because, I mean, the spectacle of we made the Statue of Liberty walk into the city to rile up the crowd. That's a spectacle. They had
a cool concept.
They had 100-foot tall Marshmallow Man, and they had to find a way to top it, and they went uniquely New York.
And this time it's the savior of the city instead of the destructor of the city.
Yep. The little twist.
Yep.
I think where they really lost out was the scale. Right.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters 1. This is the end times, end of the world. They're talking Revelation, the Destroyer, yada yada. Vigo's
he's just a dude.
I actually I had a problem with the scale in the first one, and I actually liked the scale in this one better.
You tend to like smaller scale.
Yeah. I think you generally can get better stories out of smaller scale.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I don't think they did it here. But I was sold on, in 1, this could be the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
In 2, I was never sold on this is really that big of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Just in general.
Right. Well, there's no raising of stakes if the sequel has lower stakes.
Yeah, it just doesn't flow. So we got in there. We got our say on that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Casting, Andrew, or performance. Sorry.
I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
I mean, just because it's still the same cast and they still have generally the same chemistry and everything like that. However, it has been 5 years. So I felt like Bill Murray was kind of phoning it in for this one. A lot of his quips never really hit that hard like they did in the first one, where his dry humor really just kind of set the tone in a lot of scenes that I found really funny. But in the second one, he just kind of like was talking and it just kind of existed. And there was never really, especially whenever he was interacting with like the baby and Sigourney Weaver, it just felt very stilted.
Yeah.
Then I don't really think I don't think Sigourney Weaver was really that on for that movie either.
There were some, particularly in the climax, where she's like wrapped up in the hose or whatever right at the end, and she's just kind of like, oh no, somebody do something, like and for her having come off of delivering such ridiculous lines in the first film and putting all of her art into it and it being believable.
Yeah.
It was a very different sort of performance.
Maybe she just wanted to be possessed and she wasn't being possessed.
It's like, this is not what I signed on for this franchise to be.
So, but the shining star though was Rick Moranis trying to be a lawyer.
Yes.
Again, that entire scene is just absolute gold.
The judge is great.
Yeah.
I can't think, I don't know the actor's name. He shows up in a lot of stuff in that era,
kind of role.
And yeah, he's great at it. So I gave it an 8.
Okay.
And it's weird, right? Because it's the same people.
Yep.
It's a lot of them still at the peak of their power.
Yeah.
And you're right. There are several phone in moments. The chemistry is not there.
Yeah, it just kind of lost a lot of the spark that the first one had.
And so that 8 is down from from the first one?
10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how many points did you drop it?
I dropped it 2.
So 2-point drop, 2-point drop. I also had a 2-point drop. I went down from a 7 to a 5. So basically we disagree on where the starting point is, but we agree on the magnitude of how much it lost.
How much it fell.
Yeah. Well, it just didn't, like, everyone just kind of, like, there's just not a lot of there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what the real problem is? They cast a baby.
They cast 2 babies.
2 babies.
However many babies they needed to represent one baby. Babies you don't get emote, right? There are so many scenes that revolve around a character that cannot speak, cannot really emote, can't do anything like that.
It either cries or it's happy, or
so everyone else has to act around it.
Yeah.
And you're acting around this,
but it's kind of like acting on a green screen.
And it's really hard to come through. And the most generic thing you do with a baby is you make poop jokes, right? Oh, get a stool sample, right? That comes up.
Yeah.
And it's just or diaper jokes. There's not much to work with there, and that's a plot issue.
Yeah,
but also it is literally a casting choice of don't cast a baby.
Well, it's tough too because they kind of tried to do the bait and switch of like, oh, she has a kid, it's probably Venkman's because they got together at the end, but then it's not actually his, and they haven't been together for 4 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that was short lived, so there wasn't really like any kind of like mystery about it.
Also, well, I'll save that for plot. Yep. Okay. So we got our ribs in here, right? We're good.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
Score, Joel.
1 out of 10. It was they lost the magic that they had with the original main theme, and every single transition scene was completely drowned out with 80s pop music. And I'm not an aficionado of 80s pop music. I can't with any authority say that it was good or bad, but what I can say is that it completely pulled me out of the scene.
It was totally different from what they were trying to kind of emulate in the movie. So I also gave it a 1 out of 10.
Okay.
Mostly just because the same kind of thing. It just the remix that they did with Run DMC, even though it was still written by Ray Parker Jr., it just didn't have the same thing. And I love Run DMC. Like I'm all about some early 90s and 80s hip hop and rap. it just doesn't fit Ghostbusters to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that it was too topical for the time, if that makes any sense. So
Mm-hmm.
like there are certain like musical genres that really last the test of time for, I think, like movies and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that kind of style of hip hop just necessarily lasts that long. And I know that music is always going to be a hard subject to kind of pin, because it's just not the type of music I listen to.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Well, I will help the average up a little here. I gave it a 6.
Okay.
And I mean, we were regressing towards the average, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have any real highs. It didn't necessarily have lows. They still sold mood and a little bit of horror elements here and there. It really, really lacked. They never really had that big save the day moment. You know, like the whole, I can't think of what the term is. Andrew, you might know it, but it's where the song is not background in the movie. It's actually like the characters are singing it.
Yes.
They're aware of the song.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't carry a scene with that. It doesn't necessarily work. That you can do it like Spider-Verse pulls it off.
Yeah.
But you really can't pull it off like they tried to do at the end with the Liberty.
Yeah, with the Higher and Higher song.
and they're singing to it, and it doesn't work. You know, if the Ghostbusters rolled up in the first movie singing "Save the Day" themselves,
it would just feel really weird.
It's a terrible scene, right? Yeah, they just didn't. They did not give it any chances to really soar and reach up above what it could be, because sometimes you don't necessarily get a great movie, and the score just sells it, right?
Yep.
And the score it just kind of was there.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said earlier, scoring a movie and like having music that pairs well with what you were trying to show the audience makes such a big difference in how well your movie is received. Like, yes. Music is the most important part in a visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hilarious to say, but it's true.
You have to have that connection with the characters and the story that they're telling, and it just didn't have it.
Yeah, it struggled. All right, final point here, or final metric that actually goes into the scoring, and then we'll get to the last one. Plot, Andrew?
So I gave it a 7 out of 10. I felt that it was essentially just it's basically just the first movie just again, but with a little bit of a smaller scale. It just nothing was really that interesting. They still had the same kind of antagonist from, the government bureaucrat that's trying to foil them because he just doesn't like them for whatever reason. And it was just basically the same plot. And a lot of the points that they kind of hit in the film just never really went anywhere. And there was a lot of wasted space, or really extra long scenes that just didn't really need to happen as long as they did.
Yeah, truth. Joel, what you got?
So I actually gave it the same score that I gave the first film. I gave it a 5 out of 10. And
you did not. You decided the plots were equally the same.
I did. I thought
I don't know about that.
The scale of this plot was much more appropriate than the scale of the first plot. Like these comedic shenanigans leading into, we saved the world, it's absurdist, right?
In a way,
like that's a style choice. But at the same time, if you have these guys that are they're just dudes, right, that have made gadgets, going up against not a demigod who has the power to destroy the world, but an ancient sorcerer that figured out how to preserve his soul in a painting so that one day he could come back and then he can use his magical arts to try to take over the world again, right? Like that's a much more appropriate power level of an enemy for them.
Yeah.
And so in terms of just scaling the plot, I thought that it was much better. I thought that I actually disagree with you on pacing a little bit. I really liked now we have this clue. We're going to go investigate and see where that leads us. And that leads us to this clue, and it leads us to this discovery and figuring out how to manipulate the goo. And, step after step after step, everything leading toward the same thing, where you had several different side plots with them setting up the business, with Bill Murray's character being a creep, and other things all kind of competing for screen time in the first one, whereas the second one, it was all kind of leading into the same plot.
Okay, that's totally fair.
But flip side of that, there were still really big problems. Like I did not like at all that the solution at the end of the film was everybody in New York is happy, which makes the problem go away, right? Like that is very unsatisfying. And I understand that that's a style choice that is representative of the time and not, it's just not something that vibes with me at all.
Yeah, that's fair. Steven?
6 out of 10.
Okay.
So that's a 3-point fall. Pacing is bad. I get it. You like the idea that they find a clue, the clue moves to here, they find this clue, it moves to there, etc. It took forever.
It took a long time for you to get into any kind of actual action.
So the runtime of Ghostbusters 2 is only 3 minutes. I don't know if it's 3 minutes longer or 3 minutes less than Ghostbusters 1, but it's 3 minute difference. Ghostbusters 2 feels
way
like an
longer.
Eternity compared to Ghostbusters 1.
It really does.
It feels like it takes forever to get anywhere. I can agree with Joel. If you had flip-flopped the scale of the two movies, the first one is you beat the sorcerer who's going to come back, who may be able to rule the world. He failed the first time, right? 1600s guy didn't cut it.
Yep.
So getting beat this time is believable. And now we have the in-time person who, according to Vince Clortho, has returned multiple times, but times haven't ended. But we'll skip over that massive plot hole from one that Joel just ignored.
Didn't even
catch up on him. He talks about
I should have been.
Man,
I'm gonna knock another point off a plot over.
You
here.
can't do it. The score is already set. But yeah, they had the scale out of whack. The pacing is just, it's brutal. And, like I said, they revolve so much of the plot around a baby, and so much of the dialogue has to focus on a baby. And when the dialogue is focused on Bill Murray can quit back at you. When it's focused on Harold Ramis, he can deadpan at you. When it's focused on a baby, the camera just stares at a baby, and it just
and maybe Bill Murray quips back.
Maybe there's a quip. Yeah. Well, maybe he throws something. He quips at the baby, and the baby has no response. The biggest thing that sold the first movie is the interaction of the characters, and you just drop dead weight in the middle of the characters and said, carry this, and they couldn't. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And the plot didn't really allow for it. The dialogue didn't allow for it. It's some of it's amplified, right? Coming from watching one and just double headering right into two. Basically, I took like an hour and a half break.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, it
was pretty rough.
It's pretty brutal. I was surprised because again, nostalgia, reaching back. Ghostbusters 2 was pretty decent in my mind. I remember the Statue of Liberty being, moving. That was really cool.
Yep.
Really cool idea. And then watching it as an adult, from a critical perspective, oh my gosh, this is a slog.
Yeah.
So
it definitely lost a lot of the magic, and I think that's one of the reasons why Ghostbusters 3 was scrapped back in the the 90s or whatever that they were planning on doing it. Right. I also don't think that any of the original cast was really interested in it at the time because of how sour they were from number 2. But I think that's also a reason why it took them almost 25 years to come out with something new, and then it didn't work again, which was the 2016 reboot that they attempted.
Right.
And then now they're trying again with Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is a direct continuation of the second film,
the original universe,
Ghostbusters. Right. And so with that, I mean, there's really not much else to talk about Ghostbusters 2 beyond it just wasn't that good of a film.
Faithfulness score, right?
Yes,
it does not count in the total score, but it is still worth taking a look at. Andrew,
4 out of 10.
Anything to say on that?
Nope,
just 4 out of 10. Joel?
I gave it a 9. I thought that it was faithful to the original material of the preceding film. It didn't build on it per se, but it also didn't undermine anything that it inherited.
Yeah, I give it an 8. It's valid that Dana would be like, hey, maybe 6 months into dating Bill, he's a creep. Moving on. That's very believable.
Yeah.
Ray is a cult bookstore seller. Totally believable.
Yep.
A lot of these points were just very the fall. Honestly, the most believable thing is they saved the day in the first one, and then the county and the city sue the crap out of them for damages and everything else. That
was probably the most accurate thing out of anything that film could do, because that is exactly what would happen.
Well, that theme carries into one of the greatest animated movies of all time. The Incredibles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know where you're going with
and
this.
What happens to the supers?
Yeah.
They have to be.
I thought I was going to have to fight you there for a second, but I'm on board.
Oh, what animated movie did you think I was going
I don't know, but there's so many, and it was you were going to pick wrong. I could feel it.
And then I said Incredibles.
But then you said Incredibles.
Okay.
And I was on board. Everything was fine.
I mean, it kind of goes on the same concept of Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Will Smith. Yeah. Where basically, like, he's a superhero, he's really good, and everyone hates him for it because he destroys everything and every time he tries to do something.
Right. Well, he doesn't try not to very hard.
Well, but he's jaded at that point.
Sure.
And it's kind of one of those things where, like, I do enjoy whenever franchises and stories take that and they're like, hey, this is probably what it would actually be like. Is like, hey, you saved the day, cool. You just destroyed my entire apartment building. I need money.
Yeah,
for that,
and we will get it from you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reverse MCU, right? MCU, half of New York has been destroyed like 8 times.
Yep.
And everybody's just fine with it. It's okay.
Yeah, no big deal.
No big deal. Just
come
on, Iron Man, let's go again. Let's do it again. Burn it down. Rebuild it better. Anyways, well, I think that sounds like all the time we have for this episode.
Well, hold on. Wait a second.
I'm in trouble.
Let's talk a little bit about what we are excited about for the new one.
Oh, you want to include stuff that isn't actually in the episode. You want to talk about Afterlife.
Well, no, there's really not much to talk about Afterlife except for just kind of what our initial hopes for, just kind of what we've seen with the trailer and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Just because, we want to have an idea of what we're going into before, just so we can be wrong about it whenever we...
we want to do the typical fan thing of, I want this thing to be in the film, and then when it isn't in the film, we throw a fit.
It's less that as it is, there's no time like the present to make completely wrong predictions.
Exactly.
You just used
I mangled it.
Yeah,
and I also mangled it.
Yeah. I'm offended on multiple levels.
I got halfway through it, and I was like, I don't know how to end this.
Okay, well, Joel, you get to start.
Okay, so I enjoy Paul Rudd as a comedian, so that's a bonus. I am more excited about it now than I was before, because before doing the research for the show, I had only ever seen the original Ghostbusters once, like 15 years ago. So now
and he didn't even know Ghostbusters 2 existed.
I didn't know Ghostbusters 2 existed. Like, I was aware.
I forgot about that.
I was aware of the existence of the 2016 Ghostbusters, but I also knew that it wasn't in the same continuity.
Yeah.
So now that I am up to speed on that continuity, I'm interested to see how they make a return to it and if they can make that successfully. There's stuff in the trailer about, you see one of the little containment boxes and he fiddles with it, and
the trap,
and a ghost pops out, and pandemonium ensues. And so that's very much in line with the funny hijinks moments of the original films, both of them really. But you also kind of have an edge of danger and a little bit more realism, just because the effects are on point, right? They're there.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm kind of on the same line. I'm definitely excited for the new film, especially after rewatching the films just for doing this episode. But I'm also a little worried that they're going to lean so heavily into either bringing older characters back, or they're going to lean really heavily into just, hey, this is nostalgia. You like nostalgia. Mm-hmm. Remember who we're going for. This is for all of you millennials that also like nostalgia. And I worry about them just leaning so hard into it that there's really not going to be any actual substance to the movie, and it's just going to be just kind of like the greatest hits of what Ghostbusters, or of what they think that we think needs to be in Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I feel like that would be an easy trap for them to fall into.
And that's my biggest worry about it, just because, like, I want it to be good and I want it to be a continuation of the story and not just a retread of, oh, well, you remember you like the Ghostbusters car? Well, we got that. Mm-hmm. Oh, you like them busting some ghosts? Yeah, we have a couple of those too, but just with new characters. Oh, actually, there's older characters in here too. Is that Steven?
Well, all right. You just soured the ever-living daylights out of the things that I was excited about.
He was like, I wanted to see them bust some ghosts in the old car with maybe a couple of the old characters coming back.
No. We don't need the old characters. Don't have to be there. They can be there in photos and a diary or whatever. And I'm fine with that. But no, like they have the scene in the trailer, right, with the car and the side door opens and they have the side gun.
Yeah. And
like that was in the animated show, that was in the toys, and it's like, oh yeah, we're getting this, and you're like, yeah, they're just gonna rely on this. Oh crap.
No, I will say, like, with the upgraded visual effects and stuff that we have now, I am very excited to see some action scenes with like kind of like the whole suite of ghost busting gear that that we watched in the TV show or the animated show that they had, or the video games and all this other kind of stuff. And especially I really like I can't remember the actor's name, but the Stranger Things main character,
Stranger Things kid,
because he's one of the mains
of the Stranger Things along.
I think it's just him.
I thought there was another one, but maybe not.
Man, their whole early career is just trading on 80s nostalgia.
I mean,
yes. Well, but the thing is, a Stranger Things is kind of Ghostbusters from a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, they cosplay Ghostbusters in the second season.
They do,
which is hilarious. But anyways, so I am interested to see that kind of mashed up, the more comedic timing that you get in Ghostbusters with kind of the Stranger Things approach to the paranormal. And that is one thing that from the initial release, not like a teaser or whatever that we saw, it was like, okay, yeah, I could see how they could pull that off.
Yeah.
And I am interested to see and I am reaching back into poor memory here, but I believe a lot of the story revolves around the Gozerians, right? The Gozer worshippers.
Yes.
And because they do, watching Ghostbusters 1, right? They talk about, when this, whoever the genius architect was died, he had over 1,000 followers.
Yeah.
And then I think it was in one of the trailers, maybe an article, they've established like a temple in a mine near where all this is happening. So it's an interesting way to continue in universe the stories that were laid down in one that 2 basically doesn't touch, right? One focuses on these things and jumps forward.
And that's kind of, it's one of those things where as long as they expand on it and not just rely on that as a storytelling device, I'm fine with it.
Right. Well, and I missed saying this in the plot, something they did right in Ghostbusters 2, that some other unmentioned sequel trilogies, they won't be named here, had an issue with, that they put some time in between the first and the second.
He's talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, I'm talking about Star Wars. but they put some time, they put some room to breathe, right? We got 5 years between first and second, and now we're getting multiple decades. So there's room to breathe. There's room for, you don't get the same thing like what you got in original trilogy Star Wars, where the characters had chance to become slightly different, and you could see how they're different, not just on screen, but it carries into it. And you get that from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
You won't get that with Afterlife because in theoretically, all of those characters are probably dead, and they're only going to be referenced in, again, diaries or whatnot.
So, yeah.
But it will be interesting just to see the universe have that room to breathe in between.
So just as a... oh my gosh, I can't even remember. Ray.
Yes.
Ray's character is confirmed to be in the film. So at the end of the main trailer.
I feel like that belongs beyond the spoiler wall.
No, it's in the trailer. He picks up the phone.
Answers the phone.
Yeah, he answers the phone.
Right.
He is absolutely in the film.
So we will have a little, but that's more of kind of the old Luke.
Yeah, maybe.
There's possible for that disaster.
As long as he doesn't take the proton pack and throw it behind him, we're okay.
Or drink Slimer milk. Got him. Got Joel too.
On that note,
that does in fact sound like all the time we have for this episode. So until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joel.
And every spoiler was intended because they're 40 years old.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Spoilers Intended. If you would like to join the conversation and maybe suggest something you think we should review, head over to Discord. If you really liked what you heard, you can also support us on Patreon. Links are in the description below.